Welcome to the Irrational podcast, the podcast where the concept of right or wrong is mostly irrelevant. Together, let us explore difficult and fascinating topics in the attempt to understand the rationalities that lie within the irrational. Our goal is to get lost in rabbit holes and hopefully come out with thought-provoking discussions. This is the Irrational podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the importance of recognizing when you can be vulnerable and recognizing the consequences of not being able to be vulnerable when the situation calls for. So, vulnerability has been a topic that has been on my mind lately for the last couple of weeks. At the end of the day, just so you guys know a little bit more about me, what I care about the most is self-improvement. Is what can I do to improve myself, my own current posture in life, and if there's a way I could benefit this world, then hey, congratulations, everybody wins. But lately, more than ever, I've been thinking about, just ways I can continue to improve myself because, doing during COVID and being at home a lot of the time, you obviously have a lot of time to think. And if you're somebody like me, you like to explore. I love exploring, as it's exactly why I've started this podcast, as a matter of fact. So, when I go down my rabbit holes, and one of the things that I do is, I'll open up to you guys a bit, is I've been doing group therapy, and I've been noticing the amazing changes that have been happening in my life by doing group therapy. Regardless of the group therapy itself, what I realized was, in the group therapy session itself, there's a lot of women there, and the women there just rarely talk. They rarely speak up, and I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say that they're wrong. Everyone has their own walk. Everyone is the way that they are. I get that. What I really began to realize is that not just these women in my group therapy, but just in general, people are afraid to be vulnerable. They are afraid to speak up. They are afraid to engage in conversation, have somebody who could possibly challenge them and say, hey, maybe you're wrong here, or, maybe you could look at it this way. They don't want to do that. These people right here is what I've learned is the norm. It is perfectly normal to not open up, not be vulnerable, not want to help out another person anymore. Everyone is too selfish. Everyone is too about me. What can I get for myself? Forget the other person. And I think that's kind of sad now that I think about it. And sure, I could go down another rabbit hole, like, why did things get so bad, and how is it that we're here in today's society? But I don't want to talk about that, because in reality, things aren't that bad, at least in my opinion. Ultimately, I want to stay on the topic, or at least want to try to stay on the topic of vulnerability. So what does being vulnerable even mean? So I guess you could say we have your traditional sense of vulnerability, where you have, and please apologize for stereotyping, I'm just giving an example. Let's say a female, 90 pounds, midnight, troubled neighborhood, walking down a dark alley, one or two suspicious males. I think we can all take a step back and go, yeah, she seems to be in a pretty vulnerable position, assuming she doesn't have a weapon to defend herself. But that is one way of looking at vulnerability. But the vulnerability that I'm referring to is being able to open up to your partner when you need to open up. Being able to let your children know that, hey, it's okay to look a little sad from time to time. It's okay to recognize that you're angry. It's actually healthy to let that out. And where women really succeed way better at than us men in general, is their subconscious understanding of the importance of recognizing when you can be vulnerable. And you could even go a broader step, and I'd say that the mental and emotional recognition to be vulnerable at a gradual level, they are way ahead of us. And we're paying the consequences for that, because when you grow up your entire life, literally your entire life, like I'd say the majority of us males do, doing everything you can to not be vulnerable, depending on what point of your life is, you can very well one day look back and go, man, I missed out on a lot of opportunities. All the times, like for myself, I speak for myself, and I say all the times I wanted to talk to women, all the time that I wanted to make friends, all the times that, I wanted to just live life. I'm being completely honest here. I didn't. I didn't because I was scared. I didn't because I was worried about rejection. I was worried about what they would say. And I've had trouble, I'm being honest here, I've had trouble talking to women in person, and because a lot of the terrible crap that's happened to me in my life. But when I began to recognize that, hey, wait a minute, truth is I really am scared of rejection, because guess what? Rejection is a thing. I realized, oh, well, now I can do something about it. And that's exactly what I've done, and I've seen some tremendous results. So that was the realization. The realization is when you're not vulnerable, it's not like this horrible negative consequence happens to you right away. But the truth is when you're not vulnerable, when a situation calls for being vulnerable, you will miss out on a lot of opportunities. That's just a simple fact. And I can definitely take a step back and recognize that just about anything in my life that really meant something to me was when I put myself in a position where I could be hurt, I could be affected to some degree. And ironically enough, I do believe that simple fact right there, that you could be hurt or something could bother you, really does bring a lot of value. And it stores and it stays in your memory. So what then could we do about it, Well, I think there's a catch-22, because I've noticed that a lot of people, like, for some strange reason, white males, at least from what I've seen, tend to refer to toxic masculinity as a thing. But I feel like with the majority of people who refer to comments like toxic masculinity, you don't usually come from a culture that is masculine dominated. So in Latin America, or to a certain extent even the African American culture, or definitely, like certain Arabian cultures, you are literally grown up, you are baptized into a culture where you cannot show weakness. Now, this has been the case for thousands and thousands of years, so there has to be some value to being strong, being stoic, being emotionless. And that's how I grew up. I grew up my entire life not ever showing a real sign of emotion. So where I think the quote unquote correct answer here is, I think that the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I think that as a man, there are numerous times where we do need to stand there and be strong and be quiet. Not in a silencing manner, but when there's chaos around you or your partner is breaking down. Let's be real here, she doesn't need you to break down as well. That's not going to be productive for anyone. No, but what you need to do is just take it. Take it in the sense where you can take a step back and recognize it. It's not about you, and even if it is about you, it's just her feelings that are being poured down to you as the individual. That takes a level of patience, and that takes a certain level of strength that does come easier to men in general, in my personal opinion. Those moments are fine. Those moments are what makes us stronger, or what makes us men unique. But on the flip side to that is, well, what about when you're hurting? What about when your shield is down? What about when the people that literally love you can recognize and say, hey, what's wrong? But because of your own pride and, well, literally out of your own arrogance, you can't. You say, oh, nothing's wrong. Bullshit. Truth is, something is wrong. And the truth is I do believe that it's weak, as a matter of fact, to not be able to recognize when something is wrong, and not being able to say and acknowledge when something is wrong, because why are you hiding? If you're an alpha, if you're strong, why do you have to hide your feelings? That's not very strong. If you claim to be top dog or whatever you think you might be to some degree, then be yourself. But when you're not being yourself, or when you feel like you can't be yourself, and I'm talking about when you really stop and think about, like, well, geez, why can't I be myself? Or why don't I feel like I can be myself? Then we have an issue. And it's an issue that definitely needs to be recognized, and an issue that definitely needs to be worked on. Because, dude, or whoever the hell you may be listening out there, it's okay to be vulnerable from time to time. But, and this is ultimately leading to the final point, but with the right people. Because one of the biggest worries about being vulnerable is being vulnerable to the wrong person, and where the person won't know what to do with your vulnerability. They won't be able to accept it, or even worse, they'll make fun of you, they'll get angry. Who the hell knows? And those are honestly horrible, horrible people. I get that the majority of them have been really traumatized. They probably don't know better. But let's face it, those rare moments where somebody's actually being vulnerable, and if you can't accept that as a person, you have a very serious problem. But disregarding those facts, at the end of the day, everyone, and I do mean everyone, regardless if you're a male, female, transgender, whatever the hell, everyone needs to find at least one person, in my opinion, that they can be vulnerable with. And when you can, and when you finally learn to develop the trust, and when you do put yourself in that position where, I hate this feeling, but you know what, I'm just going to put myself out there, a lot of amazing stuff can happen. When you get used to that just horribly icky feeling, that's where magic happens. That's where you begin to break through your barriers. That's when you begin to do things and reach the next level of tiers, whether it's your social skills,